Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
And welcome into Purple Access. Judd, Zulgad, Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune sports columnist, my buddy from years ago on the Access Vikings beat when things were flying fast and furious, just as they have been the past few weeks. Chipper, I want to start with this because we could talk about the QBs now. I mean, for now, it looks set. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think it's set for now. But anyway, I feel like the talk about the quarterbacks, which, by the way, the Vikings allowed to continue, so I'm not defending them on this, but I feel like it has sort of caused a lot of us to not talk enough about what they've done. And like as far as I'm concerned on paper, like you don't play the games that way, but as far as I'm concerned, since the beginning of free agency, with who they've signed, what they've done positionally, what they seem to be doing with the comp game as far as getting draft picks for 2026, this sure feels like a home run. Like they've done a lot. They've done a lot of good things here.
You know what's funny, Judd? Did you feel the same way after free agency last year that you felt this year?
No, I didn't.
I didn't either. I think there was some, like I didn't know. I mean, I had heard of Jonathan Grenard, but I can't sit here and tell you I'd watched a lot of his tape and knew like, okay, he was going to be this much of a difference maker. Van Ginkel, we knew he was a good player, but I didn't know he'd be this much. Cashman, I had no idea he would be this good. So that's not to say all of these signings are going to work out in the same manner that they did last year, but I feel like this year or this free agency period, it basically went right. If you gave Kwesi a checklist, and said, "Here it is. This is absolutely what you have to do to make this team better." I feel like they basically checked. I don't know if all the boxes, but pretty much darn near most of them. When you added 2 interior offensive linemen, 2 interior defensive linemen, 2 running backs, and I'll count Aaron Jones as that. Mm-hmm. Depth at secondary, re-signed Harrison Smith, or brought him back. This team, on paper, we'll say it that way, but they got better. I don't think there's any doubt you can say that. So I would give them an A. I mean, I don't know how you could give them anything less than that.
So you bring up a really interesting point. Do you think that and look, they had way more cap space.
Yeah.
They signed a lot more name players that the public knows. But how much do you think that just in the back of our minds, Chip, that we are even more impressed because last year's class turned out so well too? Because I contend, I honestly think since the start of free agency as we know it in the league, the 2024 class, I think, is the best class the Vikings as a whole, everybody included, has ever signed. And I wonder if that's playing a role too, because the trust was built.
Well, that's it. It's like these two it's like a swing. Like you have the trust that you have in Kwesi, and it's not just Kwesi. I'll say Kwesi and staff, the personnel staff and coaching staff, to get it right in free agency. Now you need this other piece. You need Kwesi and the scouting staff to get it right in the draft. But in terms of identifying players that are available that fit the scheme, like, is there any doubt in your mind that Brian Flores said these are the defensive tackles that we need? Like, particularly Jonathan Allen, I think he was,
right.
And Hargrave, I think fits that too. But I'm sure Flores was knocking on the door today. Hey, we need 2 tackles. We got to have tackles that rush in there, So, so it's a combination of what they did last year, and I think a continuation of kind of this synergy that the front office has with the coaching staff in terms of identifying and bringing in players that fit what they want.
No, I think you're right. Like that's the thing is it doesn't feel like, and we don't know this, but I'm just saying just from a feeling, It doesn't feel like the GM is signing guys because that's who he likes. It doesn't feel like the Flores thing, and it's why Flores coming back is so huge. Because from a personnel standpoint, and I believe when he started his career with the Patriots, he started in more of a personnel role. But like you could tell, he really knows exactly what he wants and needs. And that's where my point goes to the trust, because if he came to, and I'm assuming he did a year ago, to Kwesi with that list and said, these guys will fit. I mean, it was good signing, He got 2 guys. Hunter was missed and he was good, but he basically replaced him with 2 guys who are probably more suited for schematically what Flores wanted. And so there's just a lot of things that you're right are really, there's a synergy there that I don't know certainly exists with the majority or a lot of organizations.
Yeah, and I think that's not to discount Kwesi's staff in terms of Ryan Grigson and
he's getting it done.
The personnel side in terms of they do a lot of work and they're identifying. Now, you could come back and say it's easier to hit on established players than it is the unknowns of the draft, and I mean you'd obviously agree on that, right? But I think you do have to find. Even though they had the cap space this year, Judd, that they didn't last year, fit matters. I mean, it absolutely matters, particularly with that defense when you're doing different things than other defenses. And like you think about, and Brian Flores has admitted that how Cashman got on his radar was Mike Sherrill's, right? The former Gopher player.
Great story.
Who's good friends with Flores, and he obviously coached Cashman at the Gophers. But they probably looked at him and said, "Hey, might be a better fit in our defense than Houston's, or he'll be an even better fit. Not that he was a bad fit in Houston, but he'd be fit perfectly with what we asked that linebacker spot to do." And you probably you can get him for a value pick. You're not going to have to overspend and break the bank for some of these picks, or some of these free agents. So that's where I think it comes into play. And if you don't have that trust, or you have a GM that says, "I'm the GM, I'm the boss, I'm trusting my staff," and I don't think this is anything. I'm sure most staffs work with their coaching staff and say, "Hey, you want this?" Is not anything. They're not doing anything different, but I do think there's. When you're having the success that they're having in terms of finding guys, and these guys, this class has to pan out like last year did, it does speak to you have a pretty good thing going between your front office and your coaching staff.
It feels like everyone's playing their role, though.
Yeah, that's it.
That's how it feels.
That's it.
And that doesn't happen all the time.
Because egos get involved. Egos get involved.
Yeah, and GMs think I know better, and so like it really appears that, and Kwesi gets credit, and Brzezinski and the entire staff does. They get credit for executing their share of it. So I'm not trying to take away, but if Brian Flores sits down and says, "Here's who I want," this is who fits, and that involves O'Connell to a certain degree backing off himself from that.
Yeah,
it feels like they're all doing what they should. Now we might find out what I just said is totally wrong. And the egos are flying, and the F-bombs are too. Yeah. But it does feel like, and we covered a lot of teams where it got murky, like who's doing what, and this doesn't feel murky.
Well, we only have to look as far as last year's GM, where the GM took a quarterback that the coach didn't want, and both in free agency and draft pick, right?
And the coach left the draft. He walked out of the draft. I'm good.
Same thing with Cousins. We're overspending on a quarterback, and it's going to take away from other resources. So you have to have. I mean, that's not to say there's not disagreements and arguments and all that. It's not all harmony, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, you have to be aligned in what, how you put the team together and what you're looking for. And so, as far as we know from what they, what you see, I just think this free agency class, I didn't know that they would be able to find 2 starters on the offensive line and 2 starters on the defensive line.
Yes.
Before the draft even got here, Judd.
Oh, no question about it. And we talked about it, And I think we talked about it and all thought they're not going to find, like I thought it would have been a home run if they had found one defensive tackle, a guard and a guard, or a guard and a center, but to find four to get it that bolstered, to me, is really impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, you looked at it. I mean, they've added depth there too with some signings. I mean, and then Bradbury, just that doesn't surprise me that they moved on, Judd, because I just don't know when a player has been here that long and given that much and has that much experience. Are you going to get the upgrades the improvement that you need?
Right.
I mean, you can try schemes, you can bring in a new assistant offensive line coach, but it's sort of like, okay, that area, the interior line, needs to make a pretty significant jump.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know how, if you don't change the personnel, how you do that.
So do you think Blake Brandel is the starting left guard then? That being said, what's your thought?
No. I think now he could be, but I've said all along that I think there'll be 3 new starters there.
Let me give you something I thought of. I brought this up on Purple Daily a couple of days ago, Chipper. It involves the 2009 line, okay, which was damn good. McKinney, who was really, really talented, didn't necessarily care about football as much as I thought he probably should. But then in 2006, they bring in the Hall of Famer Steve Hutchinson, and McKinney's play lifted up. Like, there's no question. And
sure.
Bryant, and when Bryant worked, he was damn good. He had great feet.
He had incredible talent and skill.
Exactly. So there's no dismissing that. Yep. Matt Burke was a hell of a player.
Very good.
And in 2009, they drafted, I believe, with their second pick after Percy, Lodeholt to play right tackle. Mm-hmm. That left Anthony Herrera at right guard. And in my opinion, he was fine. He was not special, but he was fine. But I guess my question is, thinking back to that, can the presence of Ryan Kelly at center and Christian Darrisaw, hopefully back for the start of the season at left tackle, take a guy like Brandel to a place where the line is so strong around him that he sort of can come along for the ride and his deficiencies aren't as evident?
Yeah, absolutely could. I mean, and I don't want to say, I didn't think he'd be back, but the way you frame it, it makes total sense. If you surround guys, I mean, I thought Anthony Herrera was a above average guard, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to know on its own, but when you put
great line,
a good center and a good right tackle next to him, same way as, if you put, you're right. I mean, you're going to have a accomplished center and an elite left tackle around him. Will that raise Brandel's? Could be. I mean, that they very well could be looking at that. Could be moving. Was it Rouse?
Walter Rouse.
Walter Rouse. Could give him a shot at it.
Absolutely.
But that I could see that totally as a possibility, because I think they're in pretty doggone good shape. Across the line, except for that spot, and Brandel, maybe if you're trying about, he'll be better if you plug in those guys. So, but just as a starting point, it's interesting, Judd, because we've talked so much about the running game and lack thereof, and it was better last year, no doubt about it. Aaron Jones brought that component, but it's still, I mean, when you look at the moves they made in terms of the offensive line and then the running backs with Jones and then the trade, I mean, one, it just tells me that they got to be better in short yardage and inside the 20 at that. But all that stuff, it was like the smoke or the hints or the morsels saying, guess what? We're building this around the rookie quarterback. And that's why the Rodgers stuff never made any sense to me, for a number of reasons. But it's like they are putting J.J. McCarthy in the best possible spot to succeed.
Yes, which is exactly what they should do because the kid's a top 10 pick. So we recorded last Thursday. On Saturday night, news comes down, surprisingly, I guess, that the Vikings have traded for Jordan Mason from San Francisco. Now, this guy is going to be a nice compliment, because Jones, I like Jones a lot, but he was used too much. He wore down, and he is not what you would call, by any way, shape, or form, a physical abusing guy.
No.
Mason strikes me as a red zone delight, especially from the 5 yard or so in. And now with an interior line that's going to be a lot nastier, have a lot more snarl, and probably create some holes. Mason strikes me like everything that O'Connell said in response to Mark Craig's question after that Rams game. Congratulations to Mark, because he got KO to crack. Like the truth, that was the truth serum as close as you're going to get from Kevin O'Connell to we're going to fix this and I don't care. And he tried at the combine to be, we might not be making some personnel changes. It's like, no, Kevin, that's okay. You told us and you're going to fix it. But Jordan Mason introduces a guy who's going to be a bowling ball back there and a very tough guy to bring down. And he's going to be playing with a line that's tougher. I love this idea.
Do you see it as a 50-50 tandem?
At first, maybe.
Yeah,
at first I could.
I don't see why not. But I think it speaks more to when you get in the red zone, you can't be one dimensional. You've got to be able to run it in there. I mean, you absolutely. It became painful sometimes to watch them operate where they just can't get those yards that they need, and that, that's not just any one thing. It was line, it was all this stuff, So I think Mason gives them that, and the additions on the line. I just think it's going to make this team different in terms of in those critical situations, being able to not just have to rely on the quarterback to make a play, or it just becomes too difficult to score that way. And so, I can see it being a 50-50 because I think, Aaron Jones, as talented as he is, if you take some of those carries off him, maybe that you keep that explosion. You certainly avoid the injury or the wear and tear, but he could be just if he can keep that explosiveness.
Yeah, and Jordan Mason's style of play screams short career, but that's okay.
Yeah,
because that's what. So he's going to be the poster child for why running backs by 30 are washed up and don't get paid. But in the meantime, his style of play right now is huge. It's enormous. Chipper,
Is he Chester Taylor? Is he Chester Taylor?
I don't know if he's as good a blocker. He can block. I don't know if he's as good. He the one thing I guess going into 2024, there were serious questions about his blocking.
Yeah.
And he took a huge step, which is big. But last season, I looked this up a couple days ago. I believe it was 5 yard line in the red zone. The Vikings, 4 rushing touchdowns. 4 all season. And that's where you're right. Like that Detroit game, the last game at Detroit, when Darnold is melting down, they didn't have any other out. That's got to be hand the ball off and score a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, there was a stat, I can't remember what it was. I'll have to go back and look, and I'll get it for next week, that Gessling had late in the season about their short yardage running and running in the red zone, and it was just abysmal. Like it was like, this is not sustainable, right? So,
Correct.
And just think about like what that'll do for McCarthy, and not have all that on his, you get in there and it's tight, and you're asking him to carry everything. So, I mean, I think this offense really, really, if healthy, has a chance to be a lot more harder to defend because they will be able to run the ball in situations that they haven't been able to run it before.
And I think the one thing that O'Connell found, and heck, that we found out too, is you can talk about being tougher in training camp, and you can start the season off being tougher, like more stout, more up. But the reality is when it gets real cold outside, and I don't care if you're playing indoors or outdoors, because the game just changes as the season continues, that there is no substitute for actually being tough. And that Detroit game, especially, I thought, and the Rams playoff game sort of proved that. And so now it's because it's one thing to say, Garrett Bradbury, I want you to be tougher. And that's great.
Yeah.
And he's going to try. He's really going to try. But Ryan Kelly's going to be tougher.
Well, and not only late in the season, but, when you get to playoffs, it's like you're playing good teams. You're not playing the worst teams in the league.
That's the thing is the game changes.
Yeah, the game changes because in general, they're going to have good offensive lines and good defensive lines, right? Because that's the reason why they're there. So,
yes.
So you need to be. They just, I mean, it was obvious they had to get bigger and they had to get more physical and had. I think these additions are going to make them nastier. You know, have that edge to them. So, yeah, I mean, it's. And he's still got a ton of money left over, right? In cap space.
I want to ask you about that in a second.
I don't.
I'm gonna ask
something.
you about that.
There's something there, right? I mean, there's a play coming that
something's going on.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I'm glad it wasn't used up all on Aaron Rodgers, but it's got to be something.
It never was going to be.
No, I don't believe that. I mean,
I'm with you.
I'll say this because I know this has been a huge talker. There is no doubt in talking to people that they discussed it. I have no idea to what level, depth,
Right.
You know, that's, I can't give any insight on that because I don't know, but I do know that they talked about it.
Right.
Was it 5 minutes or was it 4 days? I don't know, but I can tell you they talked about it. Now, everything we just discussed, it might have been just like, yeah, wouldn't that be something? Okay, all right, now let's get back to reality type thing. But everything they've done to me speaks to building around a young quarterback and helping him to succeed. So it never made any sense to me whatsoever. I understand why they talked about it as a staff and as an organization, but again, I don't know how. I really don't know how in depth it got.
Right.
But it just never made any sense to me.
So I think it's safe to surmise that Aaron's people called the Vikings, that the Vikings talked about it. I also think, knowing him a little bit, as we both do, that Kevin O'Connell's not the type to dismiss that immediately because he just doesn't want to. Like he is very, very, very sensitive about players that play quarterback.
Yeah.
And so I'm with you. Like, did it get as far as The Athletic with Rossini and Silver took it? I have no clue. Did they discuss it? Absolutely. Yeah. But in what context, with what role, with a contract, which I don't think was presented ever.
Yeah.
And everything about what they've done screams rookie contract. McCarthy, again, a top 10 pick. He's not the 50th pick. And so I'm glad it's done. I will say this. So all the reporting done on Wednesday left the door open for like things for now. And Seifert has said that like the Vikings haven't like completely put this to bed. And my only fear, and the Vikings I would hope would be strong to push back against this, is that it's going to be Rodgers. If he doesn't sign with Pittsburgh here fairly soon, I think he's going to pull the Favre 2009.
Yeah, now you want to go to camp and type thing? Yeah.
Well, no, not just that, but I want to play for you. So if your quarterback struggles, because we've seen it before, the playbook is, all right, I'm done playing. I'm retiring. But then you don't hold the press conference, and most importantly, you don't sign the papers. And then
keep it open. Yeah.
And then you hang in the weeds and you stock poor Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi. And then you're like, oh man, if McCarthy gets hurt, I'm past that. I think you need to get a backup QB who, if McCarthy gets hurt, he plays. That's my only fear, though. Rodgers is manipulative, which Favre was too, and conniving enough that I don't trust him not to try to hope something goes wrong here and hope he gets a phone call.
Well, I do wonder if the Steelers things doesn't happen here soon, then to me it's Rodgers hanging out, staying in shape, and then not necessarily just the Vikings, but if another team that's a
contender,
a really good team has a contender has a injury, then Aaron Rodgers is hanging out there. Let's bring him in. I could see that scenario happening, but I agree with you. I mean, they need to find Flacco, whoever, that type of veteran that can just come in and if all hell breaks loose, you can put him in there and you're going to feel okay. They can on a short week can run the offense and all that. So and be a good influence on JJ because he needs the kind of mentorship and all that. And I think Darnold was good for that last year. I mean, I think he was
The room was really good last year.
Yeah.
Quarterback room was great.
But as far as that money, is that going to be? I mean, there's no more splashes to be made, right? Is it more depth, guys? Is it more?
I want to run something past.
You have a theory?
Well, no, it was actually, I think Phil saw this on Twitter and he talked about it on Purple Daily, and it makes a little bit of sense given the fact that they have all this cash left, which is sort of weird. And the Bradbury thing was weird because that was a nominal hit. And they easily could have paid it off immediately, and they pushed it to a post-June 1st date. So they pushed some of a very small cap hit into 2026, which was odd. So the theory is this, among the backup QB theories. The Falcons are going to trade Kirk at some point. It looks like, probably. Okay? The Vikings are leaving a ton of cap space, which they could absorb some of Kirk's contract. And what the Vikings would do then would be probably to demand a second or third round draft pick from Atlanta. The Vikings desperately need draft pick, especially high draft pick collateral in 2025. And what Phil tied this to was, if you recall, about 2019 or so, Brock Osweiler signed a big contract with the Houston Texans and was a bust completely. So the Browns, who had left themselves a ton of cap space, said, we'll take him, but you're going to send us a really good draft pick with him. We'll absorb the cap hit. We don't care about that, but we'll get a draft pick from it. I could see a world if Kirk says to O'Connell, and I do think they get along really well, okay?
Yeah.
Like with Rodgers, I got major questions. Can Kevin control him? And my thought is no. On Kirk, personally, I would not do this, but they have a relationship that's really strong. If he agreed to be the backup here to McCarthy.
Clear understanding.
But if something happens, he's the guy who's here. And furthermore, the Vikings, let's just say they get a third round pick. I think the Falcons have one of those.
Yeah.
Could that be a possibility?
It certainly makes a ton of sense, because you're not retraining some guy in a scheme he doesn't know.
Right.
Obviously but it would, I don't know what the money would be, but it would have to be a clear understanding that you're the backup. Like, not coming in here to compete with him, not coming in.
And I have concerns about that personally, but.
Because, Kirk probably, he still wants to be a starter. Is he going to settle for being a backup and being, just a mentor at this point?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's it makes sense, but it'd be tricky in that expectations need to be outlined and understood,
right.
Because you don't want anything messing with JJ's development at this point. And all the things that's going to be swirling. I just don't want, I wouldn't want, if I'm the organization, to complicate what's already going to be a complicated process.
Yeah. And I do think that there's a case to be made that there could be a draft time trade with another team for a player that brings the Vikings back a contract that they have to absorb that's not at the QB position. The other thing, too, is because so much of the market when it comes to free agent quarterbacks is now gone, that they are, and there's been rumblings about this, that they're looking to make a trade for a backup, a true one, or if they want to sign a guy like Flacco, just tell them, wait till after the draft, when you wouldn't have to it wouldn't count against your comp pick, because they've worked that beautifully. As of now, they've got 2 comp picks for 2026. Tell Flacco, after the draft, we'll sign you. It's all good, but you're not going to count then against the cap formula.
The comp,
or the comp, So that's
that
another. That's probably more plausible. That's probably more plausible.
That seems more. That seems less complicated and more likely, than doing a trade and trying to figure out Cousins, mindset and all these. So, but it's, it is interesting, and it kind of speaks to, we always talked about the magician Rob Brzezinski and how he does these contracts. That they were able to get all this done and still have all this cap space.
Well, and And they're
broke by now.
Yeah, and they're technically over the cap right now, the projected cap for. So like they're doing, they ain't dumb. Like this is not a mistake.
Right,
Oh my God, look at the books. What have we done? We're in trouble. So like there is something here. But I would not be absolutely shocked if they made a splash trade around the draft for, let's say, a cornerback.
Yeah, I
something
still think,
like that wouldn't shock me.
Like when you look at where they're at now, because they've, I'm looking at the free agents. Obviously, Byron Murphy, you added Okuda.
Who's a flyer type of guy.
He's a
flyer.
A depth, or what? Yeah.
Hurt a lot.
I still think you need a corner, a starting level corner that, maybe it's Mekhi Blackman. I don't know, but I think maybe another corner, right?
Yep.
And hey, you can never have enough defensive line help.
And don't sleep on third receiver either.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I wonder how serious discussions they got with Cooper Kupp, if that was ever really rose to the level. I mean, with what he got financially, probably not, but I mean, third receiver, but as weird as it sounds, like feels like they're in a hell of a lot better shape going into the draft now, where now you can probably pick for best player available, right?
And trade back.
And trade back, yeah.
First round, I think they trade back now.
Even though that sort of drives me crazy, but in this situation,
it depends how far back you go and what positions you take.
Yeah, I don't know. I know there's competing thoughts, is like strength in numbers versus, but man, when sometimes just take a great player where you're at.
You're right.
But in this situation,
24 though.
Yeah.
More palatable than like 12.
Exactly. Yeah. In this situation, I can see, definitely trading back and getting another pick.
But yeah, I just think that this has been, to me, and this is why I sort of was hoping that the team would have come out 2 weeks ago and shot down the Rodgers talk. To me, it's sort of sad because you guys have killed it. You've done fantastic. Yeah. Let's talk about that because, of all the polarizing figures that and that locker room is so good. Like they have, cultures.
It overshadowed. It overshadowed the last week. But I was thinking about this, Judd. Like, why do you think it took so long? I mean, were they debating it this much?
This is what we don't know. It certainly sounds like they were debating it. Like, I don't know if there was a faction that was, we should do this, and O'Connell's like, no.
Yeah.
Or if O'Connell didn't want to ruffle the Rodgers camp's feathers, and so he held off. I just think it created a really unnecessary distraction.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about you. If they had signed, and again, they didn't offer a contract, but hypothetically, if they had signed Aaron Rodgers, I would have hammered him.
Oh, yeah, because
what are you doing?
That's exactly. It would have just, like I said, it made no sense to me, and maybe it made a hell of a lot more sense to them as they talked about it. But it sure, I mean, when you have one of these things, as you and I know, having lived through Favre watch 09 and 010,
right?
Days feel like weeks in those things, Yeah. So maybe it didn't drag out as long as we think it did, just because you're thinking about it constantly when it's in the moment. But yeah, it dragged on longer than I thought it was going to do.
It got a lot of attention that took away attention from what they were doing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean, it's
both here and nationally, Chip.
Yeah. I mean, it's all people talked about was, and not as much about, hey, look at this free agent class they just signed.
Yep. The last thing from me, Chipper. So they signed Rondale Moore yesterday.
Yeah.
It's a small receiver. You saw him play at Purdue. He was
I saw him play a lot. Yeah, he was
against the Gophers. He ran a lot. He was running that way. He's running this way.
Yeah, I saw him put on a show a couple times. Yeah.
Now he's been hurt quite a bit.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and he's very small. What do you think the odds are, though? Because the statistic that jumps out is how many passes behind the line of scrimmage that are technically rushing attempts he's got.
Yeah.
What do you think the odds are that O'Connell has his first sort of potentially gimmick player here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know the injuries and all that have kind of played a part, but when you watched him in Purdue, I mean, he was just like explosive and all, So maybe that is one of those things that, hey, just get the ball in his hands real quick and let the guy. If he's in space, he's tough because he's so shifty and fast and quick. And so I think that one was probably done with some of that in mind, Judd. Like O'Connell sees something there.
Would you like to see that though?
Oh yeah, much like Brian Flores says. I see this guy in a certain role. I bet you O'Connell did the same thing with Rondell Moore and said, you know what, if he's healthy, I can do X, Y, and Z with his skill set. And so I think you're spot on right there because he is a guy, like if you get in his hands quick and let him use his quickness in space, it can be, it can be a dimension for an offense for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like in 3 years that we have seen from the O'Connell book of football, I feel like we've seen or read almost every chapter, except if there are trick plays, because they have not worked. And there's been some weird ones, but there's never been like, oh, this is your thing. And it feels like a guy like Moore, who you can get the ball to and he can be shifty. That might be the first chapter of, oh, no, O'Connell does have some ideas. He just didn't have the ability or the personnel to do them previously.
Yeah, he didn't have the guy that had the skill set that he was looking for yet, and maybe this is it. Yeah, I agree 100%. But there's only, this is why I think it's going to be fascinating because they haven't been set up to run the ball like they are now since O'Connell's got here. How much does that change what his offense looks like? Because we know he loves to throw the ball down the field, right?
Yeah. Well,
do you think it's fundamentally different, or is it just short yardage and red zone where it's going to be different?
Yeah, I think it's two things. At the end of the day, I think the interior offensive line thing that drove him crazy was the 9 sacks on Darnold against the Rams in the playoff game, which tied a league record. I think the inability to run the ball at times bothered him, but I think when he saw his quarterback hit the dirt 9 times or the turf, he was livid. Yeah. And I also think, I think the last regular season game at Detroit, I think the red zone problems there were, if I can't run the ball from the 3-yard line and my quarterback is hyperventilating, I'm screwed.
Yeah,
so
I can't win. Yeah.
I think everything he did probably had more to do with the quarterback position and the ability now to help McCarthy out and to score. It's ridiculous, Chip, when you can't score from 3 yards out.
I know. By running the ball.
And it's hard to pass there. There's not a lot of room. Guys aren't
so
running 9 routes.
Yeah, that's right. You're not
can't run a 9
there.
route. Go deep,
That's right. I know.
It's not the
CFL.
You're
100% right.
You're not the CFL. Right. I do think that, and I'm guessing this was talked about, but it definitely makes sense. This also positions them to consistently, if it's a decent position on the field, go for it on 4th and short.
Yeah, do that more. Yeah, because you got different ways to get there, right?
Right. And now you got a line that can open up the gap and a running back who can pinball himself.
That's exactly right.
Which Jones can't do, which is not Jones' fault.
That's right.
All right, Chipper. Great stuff. I will talk to you next Thursday, buddy.
All right, brother. We'll see you, man.
See you. Bye.